Hey everyone, it's Manny again. How you doing? Hope you guys are having a great weekend. I'm just piping in with some cool thoughts on recording bass guitar, bass DI, and bass amp with mics on it. Not too much in the digital world of processing, but I did want to discuss the topics of the good and bad about doing this, what some people feel. For instance, I have a pretty elaborate setup for the bass guitar, and I am tracking a record with a local band called the Gooms. And one thing I will say is that sometimes for engineers, I'm not sure where you are in your life or your career, where sometimes you don't want to take the time to do things kind of right, or to have a cool option for recording bass, or kind of just going over the top, like kind of you may say that I am. My thoughts are, if you're just doing this to make some money, then you can just go ahead and move on, because I don't think this is your kind of cup of tea. And I truly think that people just don't take enough time to realize that the bass is really cool. And if you think about all our favorite bands like John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Yes, Rush, and you get into the bass rigs and what they did and how their bass sounds on records, you realize that those aren't just DIs, those are hands, those are jazz basses, P basses, Rickenbackers, you know, Beatle bass, flat wounds, AC/DC flat wounds. And people don't even understand, when you want to sound heavy, probably even Iron Maiden, some of their older records were probably flat wounds, not round wounds. And you talk about Motorhead running into Marshall Stacks with the Rickenbacker. So yeah, I take bass serious because some of my favorite bass players are that way. So I'm going to give you two parts of this. One, you'll hear me blabbing and talking, so grab a cup of coffee. I'm going to give you some insights on what I feel about recording bass and what I used, and some studio etiquette and things I do to prepare for a session like this. So this isn't just, you know, me for days and days going through cases and drawers and Pelican cases to find this setup. Okay, so let's do the breakdown of what I have and what I'm using. And Ryan, he's going to be going through this wonderful precision bass. I don't know the year of it, but it sounds spectacular. I recommend, if you have a studio, to have some kind of pedal board made of your favorite pedals. So every time I need to do bass, I just bring out my pedal board and I drop it down. And we have, you know, Earthquaker, Death by Audio, Electro Harmonics, Rat, different overdrives. Have my favorite delay, an EP3 Echoplex. One of my, if you're gonna get an Echoplex and they're still affordable EP3s, that's Jimmy Page, that's Eddie Van Halen. Randy Rhoads used a Roland Space Echo, so if you can get one of those. Eddie Van Halen used the 555, which is the larger format. I think it's rack mounted, that could possibly fit in a recording studio a lot nicer than this one. But I love the EP3 because actually just using it without even plugging into it, it drives that amp really wonderful. Jimmy Page used to do that where you wouldn't even have it on, it's just boosting. So if you have two, that's even double the tone if you're running straight in. My pedals are all hand-picked, ones I love. And give you a little quick view of all of them. And like I said, I don't know what we're going to actually be doing. We did a whole record. These are really cool. Tascam hooks me up with some really rad headphones. Important in the aesthetic or the setup. So I have these pedals already set up. They're wired, powered up. There's no fooling around with cables. My EP3 is already ready to go, always ready to go. I give the bass player, even though, you know, I'm in this room over here, and he's playing in here because I want him to hear his amp, always a talk back. I mean, obviously you need to talk to the guy. And then when we break it down, so we have these pedals set up, and then as we set up his tone, I'll find out what he really likes and what sounds good. On this particular song, the full tone Catalyst and the delay pedal slightly on. I have the tape echo on with boost because it is kind of a preamp in itself. It's a tiny slapback, and the delay is moving really fast. And then on the amp, this is called a Twin 12. That's made by Sears, also a Silvertone. They come in smaller versions that are half that, like it'd be like right there. This head and this cabinet are spectacular. I use them for guitars. I love them on bass. And we have it set up fairly kind of middle ground. I don't know if you can see those, but they're all kind of, you know, volume is barely up. Bass is a little bit past, maybe 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the treble. There is reverb and there is tremolo on this, but yeah, it's wonderful amp. So on this setup on the mics, I've got a pretty incredible, huge tube condenser called a Myburgh. It's called the Myburgh M1. Let's turn this on because we're going to start our session. Put the power supply on. Put it on. All right. So that's a Myburgh. This one is really cool because you can see there's a selector right there. You can go from cardioid to figure 8, and the other side you can't see it, but that's omni. And that's a like a high pass filter. But it's a tall boy, it's a huge mic. I have the capsule on the just outside the center cone of the speaker. Always recommend having a flashlight so you can see where the cone is. Some people like it in the center. When you talk about sounds, you know, obviously I have that baffle off. Tascam makes these wonderful gobos, these mini gobos, and I stacked them so they cover the whole length all the way down to the bottom of the cab. It gives me great isolation. Now, if this was a really louder rig, like an acoustic rig or a Ampeg stack, I'd probably move this mic back about 3 or 4 feet. That's kind of how John Paul Jones used to record his bass. The Beatles do that. And when people talk about, oh, well, I may not have a lot of money to record, or this is crazy, the expenses of this. This is only a lifetime of working my ass off to afford some of these, but also through experience wanting these. So I set goals and worked hard and saved, and these mics came into my world. The Beatles even used headphones. So if you have a set of headphones at your house, you can plug those into a DI, put those on your speaker, and you will be surprised that turns into a microphone. And that's how the Beatles used to do some of their bass guitars. A little bit of a boutique way of doing this. That is that smaller mic. A lavalier is called the Shure SM98. Now, that is a legendary mic because Rage Against the Machine, when they play live, that was the guy on it. Steve Albini used to tape those on the top of his 201 Biodynamics that were taped to a snare with that lavalier taped to the top of it, so you get 2 mics and a very small profile on the snare drum. He also, and you've seen me hang that over the beater of a kick drum to get it tacked. It takes incredible good amount of sound pressure, doesn't buckle, but sounds incredible, man. I love that mic. It's so good. This looks like a Beyer. It is a Beyer, but it symbolically is a Beyer. Oh God, it's something X50. It's a newer model of a mic that was a copy in the body style of a really true Beyer 380. That's a very sought after microphone. I always talk about this mic. There's a guy named Colpix, I got the name right, in Nashville. He specializes in refurbishing mics. So I got this microphone as a donor body, and he's able to find the proper capsules that were in Beyer 380s, which are really hard to find, really expensive, and a lot of times are broken. So I bought this donor for like 150 bucks, sent it to Cole. He put in the right capsules and basically makes it into a 380. Now, lucky for us, this later model was just retrofitted with new capsules inside, or elements, and that's what made it easy for Cole to just switch them out because they're pretty much identical. And the real 380s were actually speaker headphones. When I talked about Paul McCartney, they actually had speaker from Beyer headphones that when they discontinued them, or they didn't make them anymore, they stopped making the 380. But those have become real sleepers and now really sought after. So I have a Beyer, I have an SM98 on this speaker, I have a Myburgh M1 on that speaker. I've baffled this off because I'm looking for a particular sound that I'm hoping to have some more control of. And then once again, this is bass guitar. Then I have a DI. So my bass setup is M1, Beyer, technically now a 380, on the same speaker, an SM98, and then I have a DI. So you're looking at 4 sources for bass. And what's cool is I'm still running a DI, which is faithful to what people say, you know, I don't want to hassle with the bass. Because we're doing a full-length record, I don't know what it's really going to bring. I just want to make sure I have options. I could reamp the DI. I could run it into, have this cool polytone. I love that. It's called a Brute, or a mini Brute. So I can always run it later into that if I want. But he's having a lot of fun playing in this room. And he's really kind of going off the vibe of the amp. So his playing is just on fire. And that's what I really wanted. I try to get the sound in his headphones pretty close to what we'll be mixing with. And it's always inspiring. It's like a vocalist that hears himself with his delay and reverbs, and no delay and reverbs, kind of gritty and clean or dirty. They always sing better. So, elaborate setup for some bass guitar. And like I said, if you were doing kind of a John Paul Jones things, I could have still kept that setup of the Beyers. I could remove that and put that mic about right here. But the sound of this amp isn't really, it's not like running out of an acoustic 360 or a tall amp peg. The low end is only going to be kind of contained around the amp. It's open back, so there isn't a lot of pressure coming out because it's being relieved to the back of the speaker. So I'm just making sure that I get a really cool sound. I could even possibly mic the back of it, but I think that's overkill. I've already done all this stuff on it, and also I can use an R-Bass and Pro Tools to make it sound heavier, which I will show you later on how I did that. So that is my bass setup, which I hopefully do faithfully a lot of times. So the preparation for this whole setup, I wanted to also give you some tips on. So I mentioned this pedal board. Kevin, who shares this room with me, that's his rig. His band is called Spirit in the Room. Kevin has a company which I'll share the link with, and he makes these custom boards that are just spectacular. So I'll connect you with Kevin, and he can build you some of these boards. You just throw them away somewhere, and when you're ready to track guitars or bass, you just bring them out. Now, some purists will go like, well, after your signal runs all that and gets into there, maybe you're not getting as much signal. Honestly, who cares? I mean, Hendrix's sound was sometimes the pedals suffocating the sound. When everybody does true bypass now, I mean, I understand how you want to get the amp to work great, but since I am embracing pedals, the sound that you get after going through all that is some ways the sound as well. And even Jimmy Page would boost his signal with an EP3. Brian May would boost his stuff with a, I think it was these small little Dan Armstrong boosters, and all kinds of tricks people used to do with that. So on the preparation, so I get my pedal boards made, prefab, so I'm good to go. I have all my cables wound up, everything's tight. And then also for the recording side of things as a producer, I bought all color-coded. it really helps me as I'm following lines in and out. Like, okay, this is the yellow is the SM7 for talkback. The red is going to the, where's the red going? It's going to the buyer. I can just easily see where it's going. And the SM7 is going directly in. The Myburgh is coming off a white one that's going into there. So everything's sorted, really easy to see. And when you have this kind of setup, carrying this around is a little bit of a bummer. I've invested and I've always had these really cool industrial cards. I love this one. It's 3-tier. I think it's rated for 500 or 600 pounds. This is a really cool tip here. If you get a drum bag and I make it into holding cables. Really easy, protects the cables. You could just, you know, if I have to run into the room and I just want to, you know, grab something really quick. Hold on. This thing is killer. So I can just move this around, set it on the floor, whatever you want. So this cart is rated for a lot of weight. Within the cart, I have all the paraphernalia for my mic. So when I roll this in, even after I'm done with all that, that gets stacked up on this cart. I get these cool little bags. This one has skulls on it. These have miscellaneous screws and bolts and things for mic stands. I have these little cases. These are pads. These are just miscellaneous types of XLRs, female to female, male to male. Any kind of quarter-inch stuff is in this one. Totally recommend this. This is an amazing for channel switching on amps. It's so good. It lets you do phase switching. So if I would have been running 2 rigs, I would have had this on the floor running 2 amps, which I do often with guitars mostly. Or even I could have done on bass. Here's some cables, and like I said, they're color coded, so it's really easy to move around. This is the Myburgh case. This is a must. I just have all my mics, miscellaneous, more dynamics in this one. I have my condensers, ribbons, and tubes in another case, but this one is, you know, most of my sessions are basically built around a lot of dynamics, so this works great for that. In the case, you know, I have some headphones that would go on the bottom, miscellaneous cables, some foam I use. The bottom are power supplies. This is my C12A power supplies. I have 2 of them. There's the other one behind it. I think I have a Altec. There's an Altec one somewhere over here. Maybe it's, oh, there it is. That's the Altec M11 for 1950 Coke bottle tube mics. So this rack saves me all the time when I'm running in and out of the studio. I have a session. When I go to clean up the session, it's really easy to just get everything sorted. I just get that all wrapped up, put it on top of the cart, and then I roll it into my studio, which is really next door in that room in there. So that's the setup for bass guitar. I hope that made sense with you. Like I said, tips would be get color-coded cabling, have your stuff sorted on a rack that's together where you know where everything is, have pedal boards made of your pedals that you would use so they're easy to install, have all your quarter-inch cables wrapped up, ready to go, clean always, have your amp serviced. That amp has happened to be recapped. It was a lot of money to get it serviced, but I have confidence in it every time I use it. The baffling, microphone selection, multiple mics, running a DI. And then when Ryan walks in, he's like, oh, cool. And he plays. And it's like, he doesn't even give it a second thought about how much work went into this, but that's okay. This is what I need to do to make cool records. Oh, shoot. And there's a train. That's my view, downtown Los Angeles. Every day. My cool drum set, my heavy duty rack, plethora of pedals and options just to record bass guitar. I kind of feel like that's what I need to do now. I hope you feel the same, or you can take what I've just showed you and do something really great with it. All right, so the next part of this video, I'll be going inside and showing you what we did and how we did it. Hope you dig it, and talk to you soon. I'll see you in the next section. My control room from the main room, and I wanted to just speak with you about some of the things here that I used on the session. The Myburgh, which was that tall long microphone for the bass guitar that I had the Tascam baffles around, that was going into this BAE. It's a 1272. A really old version, doesn't even have a phase switch, so I always got to make sure it's correct. That is being slammed into the BG1. The BG1 is a kind of an Abbey Road type of EMI compressor made by Highland Dynamics. You'll see some of these BG1s that are stereo, 2 meters, and this one is a mono. The reason I used the mono was it has a lot of features in it that aren't necessarily in the original one. I don't know where I put it, but there is a foot switch that comes with this one that I can lock in the compressor, or the limiter. So if you see this moving and you start to peg it, you can lock it in on the peg, wherever it is. And then you set this on operate, and you could kind of use this to adjust. You'll see the meter start to move this way, this way. Once you like it, you can put on hold, or actually you just keep it there and it just locks in. The meter's not gonna move. So anyways, this is amazing hot glue of compression that's really great. So I wanted to make sure the Myburgh, which is a big tall mic, runs into this, which I know this is going to get a really deep, big sound. Then I go into this, which is kind of the glue. And what's cool about it is I can slam it into that, and I have control of the output. So when I was doing the bass guitar, I got a good level. That's not really moving. Then as I push this up a little bit, I'll see this meter start to move, and I just leave it at that. I think that's just enough of a sound. You can even use it without any compression. It's kind of another mic pre, so it's kind of like you're doubling up your mic pre's. And even though that may be crazy to some, a lot of big producers I know, that's what they do. They double up their pre's with different sounds. It's kind of like running into one pre and then going into a console. All right, so this is my next section, which is mostly preamps, except for the 2 compressors on the end. This little ditty. You may be probably saying, why isn't this TT bay located up there? It came out of my old studio, which had a console, and I had a Neve console. I had a Neve sidecar, and this was connected to the Neve sidecar. So the rear of this is all XLRs that are just hanging all over the back. I wanted to utilize that without having to not only cut the wires or do anything weird, and patch bays are really expensive. I just kind of worked with this. So these cables all hang in the back. They all went up into these preamps, and they all went up in these preamps, and I had 24. These are all my Pro Tools in. So it's kind of like a matrix that just went right in the middle of my patch bay. So this is just keeping it off everything. These are my side techs, which I love them. So now we got the Myburgh coming into the 1272. This is a DMP by BAE, one of their older ones. The second mic was the Bayer 380. I have that going into my Avitas MA5s, which I love, and that's why I have 4 of them. And you can say almost all my preamps are BAE, Brent Averill era. And Avitas used to work for BAE, and that's where he came out of the Brent Averill world. And he has these MA5s, which are like brick wall, Neve type of preamps. So I can always trust these. Usually my kick and snares and top and bottoms go through these. So I have the Bayer coming through this one, the 380. Then I have the phantom power engaged, because this is the SM98. Once again, I'm semi-cranking them because the output level I wanted to match up. So what I did is I set these up on their own and looked at the meters on my Pro Tools before I put them into there, because I wanted to make sure that, I think it's really good to know before you slam something into a compressor that you know what it's doing. So I heard this raw dog. It's not even bypassing those. It's just not even plugged into those. Once I got the sound I loved, I put them into these. So this would be the Bayer, and this would be the SM98, and the Myburgh is going through this compression. So I have 3 compressors. These 2 on another speaker, so I'm just kind of keeping them like in their own world. And once again, I put them through so the audioscape is barely moving. As I start to increase the compression or limiting, I can see them start to buckle, and then I just fooled around until I liked them. Now, they're almost identical, but the SM98 seemed to capture a little bit more, which is still okay. And I really love these. These are from Audioscape. They're a recreation of the famous LA3A compressor. These are called V3As. It's a 500. Really wonderful tool to use. I have some other compressors like this 1178 is pretty ridiculous, but I've used those for guitars, and I wanted to have a different flavor for the bass. The bass DI is going into the Cytec. These, if you're not familiar with Cytecs, I love them. I was first made familiar with these with Steve Albini. When he showed me how to record, he had Cytecs, but he also had Neotech consoles. So when I bought my first Neotech, I had already bought a few of these Cytecs. So when I opened up my new studio, and I obviously don't have a console, I wanted, my world is always mic pre's. So I technically have 12 channels of Neotech, which sounds like Cytec, or Cytec sounds like Neotech. They don't have transformers in them. It's just a really clean sound, but they're just so much headroom, such a big sound. Got to use a pad on these when you're hitting high sound sources. The Vitas, the only thing that's really cool, one of the cool things about these, is that you can probably put a mic on a jet engine, and it doesn't matter. It's never going to overload this. He had designed it where the signal is almost before the transformer. So as you turn the volume up, it starts to go into the transformer. So if you have everything off, it doesn't matter if you're screaming your lungs out, you're not going to peak these. So that's what I love about these ones for heavy sound sources. APIs, you always got to pad them. And the Cytecs, you got to pad them too. So that's it. So I got my Cytecs for the DI1 Cytec. The 2 mics on the other side of the amp are going into these Audioscape limiters, which are like LA3As. The preamps are MA5s. The big boy mic is my DMP 1272 and the Bryce Gonzalez Highland Dynamics BG1. So that is the bass world going on right here. And that was coming off that room in there. All right, let's get started. Pro Tools. All right, this is our session, real drums with our bass overdub session. That's the amp with the bass mics, no DI. So that's our starting point. We just mic'd it up. I'm playing it back. Now these things that I've added to the tracks are things I would do if I'm mixing. So I just want to give it to you straight. I'm going to turn all of them off. Basically taking off the makeup here, giving you a real view of what we got. So this is all raw dog bass. This is the SM98. This is the Buyer. The Myburgh. Sounds mean. It's a tube mic. DI. Now obviously you're like, Manny, can you turn that up? Yes, I can. So what I did to process it to stay over the loud drums, I've added some compression. These are LE2As, just normal Joe's waves. I've slammed them obviously, so check it out. This is the SM98. This is the Buyer. Both together. So this is one speaker. 2 mics on one speaker. I added some more bass to make it better. Ooh, that's better. Now when I do the R bass, I just love the way it sounds. So I'm just using it kind of to add some low end, and it has this nice way of taking some nastiness off the top. So this is with the R bass on the 2 mics. With it off. With the drums. Those are all the amps. Those are all the mics on the amp. That's the Myburgh. Raw dog, nothing on it. Now, without the DI, you probably say it could be a little bit louder. So what I did on the DI, that's what it sounded like when I got it. Added a delay, compression, distortion, and that rounded it off. Now you could almost say like, Manny, why'd you ruin that? Well, when we were tracking and the bass player Ryan was in the other room, he kept on saying, I need to hear it. So that was the important thing about recording, is you got to make it fun for the people you're recording. Instead of me saying, dude, don't worry about it, we'll fix it in the mix, I actually pushed the envelope on the distortion so he could hear his bass over the drums. Can imagine the guy bobbing his head. That's what he was doing. So that is the sacrifice of your precious mix at the moment, but that can always be changed. So here's the DI again. Without the distortion, it's fine. Without it, with it. Now, this all may seem crazy to you. You may be like, man, that guy just, I don't know. I actually don't know what you would think. But for me, and regarding this record of this band, You can say this is an independent band, and the bass player is really great. There's no fudging of what he's playing. He's literally playing that. There's no cut and pasting. And part of the hardest part of this is to make the bass sound exciting over the drums. Now that's the DI off. DI in. DI off. Only DI. Add the amps. As you can tell at the end of it, I just took out the DI. But one of the things is that was just kind of a reference for him. That was making him happy, performing it. So when I described about making the artist happy or what you have to do as an engineer or producer to make things better, it'd be arrogant of me if I just told the guy be quiet and just play it and the sound sucks in his headphones. So the sound you're hearing is strictly what he heard in the room and what he loved. Now, when you hear the amps by themselves, just the mics, you can hear the tape delay. Now, I mentioned earlier I ran into an Echoplex and some pedals. That was all intentional. I have committed to that. There's no way of getting that out of the mix. So that's okay. I'm producing this record. They've trusted me with it. And this is the sound that when I set it up, I thought would be wicked with the drums. So when I talk about your options here, I have an option of just using the DI. I have an option of just using the Myburgh. I have an option of just using the one speaker with the DI, or all. So that's the beauty of that complicated setup, was just to give me an idea. When I'm mixing it, I'll choose something. Can always just disregard all these plugins on the DI, run the DI out to another amp. But for the sake of this whole conversation about the bass setup and how I'm using them, here are 4 options I have for the bass guitar. They're all excellent. I do love the Bayer and the SM98 alone. I think that sounds really cool. Myburgh. DI. Alright. So we'll leave it at that. That's a setup, a real band. We've just did this crazy elaborate setup. And I'm swinging my hands around. That's you hearing the mic hit. Anyways, have a great weekend. It's a Saturday today. Wanted to come in the studio. We were scheduled to do bass overdubs to finish this song, but with all things, my only true recommendation for instruments are get your bass intonated, and make sure that everything's great. Ryan was sweet enough to get his bass intonated, but the guy who intonated it lowered his action too low, and we didn't realize that when he lowered it low, it stripped one of the he has a badass bridge, and one of the little saddles was just ruined. So he went in today to get that repaired. So I had a little bit of time and want to use it constructively, and hopefully you've learned something from this. Always get your bass set up, make sure it's ready to go. Ryan is a professional. He went down and had a really professional set up his bass, so it's right this time, repaired what was needed to be done. And I'm sitting here talking into a mic, looking at what we did, and I'm happy. I have 10 songs to do. This is one of 10, and one of probably 10 different types of setups accordingly to the song. So there you go. Talk to you soon. This is Manny signing out.